Giving thanks, giving thanks, giving thanks. A blessed new rise to everyone. Grand Rising, Hotep, Bayete. What's up, Wagwan? All of those different greetings. We are really honored to be able to have this reasoning opportunity among African Queen Mother Warriors. I am Nasut As Senate Dr. ChenziRa. I will leave that there for now. And I would like to share our next level of opening with our beloved sisters of the African Queen Mother Warriors Rising Movement. Yes, African Queen Mother Warriors is Dr. Sandra.
Peaceful greetings and warm ancestral spiritual salutations. I am African Queen Mother Warrior SisDr, and I am honored to be in the presence of royalty again. I love the warrior aspect of who we are. Peace.
Long term. I also request that grace, that fierce revolutionary peace and wars with artivism out of this word from African Queen Mother Warrior. Basu asked, Isis.
Greetings, Bora Boye, Uja, and many greetings, Wagwan, as he said, in all our many, many languages and formats. It is an honor to be amongst the great ones, the queens, the empresses, the goddesses. Look at the beauty here today, the intelligence, the fierceness of the warrior spirit. And I'm very, very pleased that there's 4 of us here today. I feel like the puzzle is coming together. The energy is there. Blessings all.
Grateful, grateful. And also with a wordsmith, masterful engagement and exchange, and being able to bring not just jurisprudence and the legal perspective to the forefront, but to bring all levels of air, fire, earth, water, spirit, and water. Notice I said it like out of intentionally, because that ancestral spiritual vibration is always shared and highlighted by our beloved African Queen Mother Warrior, Sister Esther Side.
Giving thanks for being here. I was missing for a session or two, but I'm glad to be back. I was missing in action, doing the work.
Right.
But I've been found. I've been found and I'm back.
Beautiful, grateful. And giving thanks. So for the persons that may not be as familiar as to what is African Queen Mother Warriors, there is a orientation that is available if you look on any of our previous podcasts. We've been more formal, I should say, from December of last year. And then we've been making the intentional work move forward to be able to gather, have these reasonings at least once a month. And we usually do them on the Sundays. Usually we do it on the 3rd Sunday. However, this month, because there's so many things happening in the international, global, regional, national, as well as homegrown local spaces, it was imperative that we gathered in this forum, in this time, in this compensation, to make sure that we keep things in Ma'at, in truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. Hence the vibration of love offered through our opening video with the powerful songstress, Desiree. And I always encourage persons, and we give thanks. She's one of our homegrown daughters here in II St. Croix, and has impacted global communities specifically through her ability to use her voice to tell the narrative, to tell the legacy. And part of what we're sharing this morning is also linked to, since everyone's speaking of anniversaries, This is also an anniversary of the formal development, if you will, of not something that just happened 10 years ago, but the legacy of work of each of us that extends beyond scores. And notice I said scores plural, right? Many of us, we just look young and we carry ourselves to the best of our ability to keep that youthfulness. However, many of us have been in the trenches, in this work for decades upon decades. And so what we're sharing is coming from a space of being researchers, of being artists, of being organizers, of being activists, of being midwives. And when I speak of midwifery, midwives of the physical birth piece, but also spiritual midwives, political midwives, economic midwives, I can go on. So I would like for persons to just have that in the forefront as you're listening and hearing some of the reasoning. It was April 11th, 2015. And there were a number of international reparation initiatives happening, not only in the 48 contiguous US, but also in other parts of the globe. And there was a culmination during this global reparation movement that's really 21st century focus to support and highlight the designation that was in place for the United Nations first International Decade for People of African Descent. Again, the themes around recognition, justice, and development. And I'll just highlight the opening statement that came at the conclusion of that April 9th to 11th International Reparations Summit that to this day has still remained unanswered. And it was a simple, what does that translate into for our people in regard to these summit, that particular summit and those that preceded it? And then I quote, respectfully, all the voices and actions with sacred intentions for our liberation, unification, and sovereign social governance are to be included. In simple terms, without equal male and female involvement in the reparations movement, there can be no recognition, justice, and development. I want us to simmer on that for a second, because the entire statement, one page, was disseminated widely and with very few commentaries, inclusive of the video that is sat for over 9 years, well, now 10 years, on YouTube for persons to see and hear what was said immediately following that particular gathering, based on how sistren like us were dismissed. Some, right, I just would like to pause there and leave the floor open for the next layer of our reasoning.
Give thanks. Give thanks. I think that historical piece is really important so that it is to be understood that we didn't just come to this the other day, that we are called to do this work, that we've been doing this work in our various ways, in different continents, under different skies. And so we're very invested in the well-being of the African family. We are concerned when it would appear that a movement that is considerable appears to be hijacked, when attempts to publicly humiliate women and marginalize our voices as if this is nothing to do with us takes place. At this point, I'd invite my beloved sister, African Queen Mother Warrior Basu Esther, Sis, to remind me and maybe share with others how some of this happened.
Giving thanks, giving thanks. Well, I think realistically, if I look around this screen at the queens, the goddesses present here, I probably came to a lot of this at a later age in terms of these formal structures. I know, for example, we're going to hear from Sister Esther, who was very young, actually, sitting in these big spaces, raising her voice, as was SntDr. And I think yourself as well, Sister Doctor. I was on the street activist, anti-apartheid, fighting police and carrying on and, you know, all of that stuff. And I think when for me, the first really introduction into this is when I met yourself and Senator Doctor in 2014 at the CARICOM second CARICOM reparations conference. And we all connected on so many levels, I think spiritually, as queens, politically, as activists, because what I saw going on there, I was like, who are these people? What are they on? What are these men? Why are they just so curtailing to the system? You know, I remember speaking with yourselves and others like, why is there a white lawyer sitting down in here in our African reparations? And then it was like, oh, no, we mustn't talk about that because, you know, there was a whole thing in Barbados. And I know Sister Esther was there for that. So I was really taken aback I thought I was going into a far more revolutionary space. And I came to realize, oh no, it ain't that revolutionary at all. And my connection with the two of you, Senator Dr. ChenziRa, African Queen Mother, Sister Dr. Sandra, was very much like, we were all like, what's going on here? Many of the men were coming with their, which I'm going to call, I'm going to call as we go through this same men syndrome, this ideology, the ego, the patriarchy, and actually misogyny, I would say, and the disrespect of our knowledge and our equity and our rights to speak. The one man who I noticed didn't do that, your king, Senator Doctor, stood like a pharaoh protecting his queen. And that's one thing that stood out in my mind, the way he stood there behind you with the power, the energy. And other men, unfortunately, there were some good people there. I'm not saying, of course, we love our men. We're not saying all of them. But what I saw there was very disappointing. And then, of course, roll forward now to 2015 to April, I come to the National African American Reparations launch. And I met yourselves, and we met our other African Queen Mother warriors, Sister Tempu, Sister Aziza, and the five of us were like, what is going on in this space? And I know we're going to talk more about it on every level, spiritually, intellectually. I mean, even the food situation. My uncle had to come and bring me food. Luckily, he lived in Queens and it was down the road. He came with some fresh juice and some that. But I was like, what are they serving us? On so many levels, the thing was just not what should have happened. And that is what triggered us to gather and become the African Queen Mother warriors we are today. I also have a story in a relationship with Sister Esther, but we'll come to that later as we move through, where we've all connected on an energy that says, something needs to change. We have so many issues to deal with. And these people, these same men, are not the solution. So I'll leave it there for now. Sister Esther?
Yes, and I came to connect with you all formally as African Queen Mother warriors much later. However, I was very aware of your presence and the video and the statement that you put out at that summit that is being commemorated today, that took place 10 years ago. And I was very infused and really, really happy to see that there were women voicing, African Queen Mother warriors, voicing what I had been thinking and feeling, and also some of the thoughts and sentiments I had been expressing in spaces, and at that time was considered, I don't know, a public enemy to some of the people who led that summit in terms of organizing it and putting together the program. Because I am a co-founding member and co-vice chair of PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe. And by this time, we had been one of the few coalitions, organized voices that had a critical perspective on the emergence of what has become the CARICOM 10-point plan, which first began obviously as the CARICOM reparations initiative. And in particular, who had been very concerned and actually up in arms around the calling on Leaday, the law firm, the white-led law firm here in the UK, to somehow take up a Caribbean reparations case. And we were up in arms because of the role of Leaday in the what's called popularly the Mau Mau case, but we say the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, some of the survivors of colonial torture who were trying to sue the British government. And that did result in a settlement that was litigated and negotiated by Leaday. But we were very concerned about the fact that our people literally got peanuts. A small class of our people, or category, I should say, of our people, just over 2,000 people, did get a settlement, but it was literally, I mean, it was really atrocious. And we felt it was not a good idea for CARICOM to think that that would be the law firm to utilize. And because the terms of that settlement actually, and many people didn't follow up on this, and it's really important that the terms of that settlement prevented future legal action for a more substantial class of survivors. I mean, we're talking about elders, mothers, fathers of the liberation struggle, the anti-colonial liberation struggle in Kenya, who were tortured, you know, women who had things, objects put up their private parts, and men who had been castrated, and all manner of really, really, you know, disgusting atrocities. And the settlement resulted in a compensation payment of just over £2,000 for elders who had survived, you know, over 50. And it was just ludicrous. So anyway, that is how I was, you know, very much part of a small group and vocal group of people that were resisting this and were sort of saying, hang on a minute, this cannot be right. This cannot be reparatory. And I would have to say that it was our actions actually led to I wouldn't say there being a total rethink, but they certainly had to change strategy and approach because of the resistance that they were meeting here in Europe and in particular in the UK. So that was the wider context within which I discovered and heard about you as African Queen Mother warriors. And I was just so proud and happy to know that there were other people actually raising these voices and challenging the process, because we talk a lot about reparations and we think about the end goal of whatever people think or envision reparations to be. But we miss out that the most important part of even achieving whatever end goal you believe reparations to be is the how we get there, the process. And what you all did as African Queen Mother warriors was really, I think, raised to an international stage. Again, not the constructive, you know, criticisms, as it were, constructive on what we should be doing. if we were really being centered as African people and we were really honoring our ancestresses and our ancestors, what our processes would look like, what our summits would look like, how we would have to honor our ancestors and ancestresses, which didn't happen, and everything else that you really brought to light. So yes, that is how we connected.
Can
And
I
of course, I had known some of you before, but we hadn't really formally connected in an organized way. Yeah.
give thanks? Can I offer some further thoughts here? I I am stimulated. I know up here, so but I am very stimulated by the word sound and the energy that we bring to this important discussion for a number of reasons. One is I love the analogy of birthing and rebirthing on different levels in different ways. I think that's really fundamentally what we're about. Believing that that which has gone before doesn't have to be the way that we continue. Especially as we are sitting within the context of a narrative that says we have another decade for African people of African descent, and that announcement coming from a body of people that are not us, like we are being given permission to do this for a longer period of time, and the likelihood therefore that there will be funds attached to this, and there will be visibility attached to this and legitimacy attached to this. I think the reference to the process is really key, because we've been given a reminder of how we came to be together, each one of us having trod as a result of spiritual calling, because really no one would choose this as a career. There is no money in it. What there is an honoring and a continuing based on the legacy we've been left by our ancestors. So we are talking about honor. However, in my observation, and I am very observant in these spaces, I don't necessarily speak every time I'm in these spaces, so people don't necessarily know I'm there, because I don't need to be at the podium or on the stage. But I am an African woman moving among people who are talking about what's going to happen to the African family. And so it's my business. It's my business because it is divinely ordained that it should be my business. It's nothing to do with my qualifications. I didn't have to go to any Eurocentric school or college or university or be in any particular clique to have been given this task. And so I invite those who are watching this to become active themselves, and not just to become viewers or listeners or audience members of the words we are bringing. I would encourage people to look at the same men, these same men who may be rooted in politics, or may be rooted in economics, or maybe historians, or maybe whatever it is they are. But they clearly are not African-centered. Because if they were African-centered, they wouldn't be attempting to hijack a movement that started long before they got involved. They wouldn't be attempting to discredit and target African women who are simply saying, we applaud your work, but There's some things that are missing. Can we enter into some kind of discourse around this? Only to be told that our voices are not welcome. In fact, the public attempt to humiliate us by turning off the microphone in a conference that is about reparations was something of a shock to all of us. I think that was the fire that forged us together, that this could be allowed to happen and nobody object. There were murmurings, but that there is a comfort that these same men enjoy when they're at the top table and they can order someone to turn off the mic, or they can be in another country and sit. They flank white men that they have brought into a space to determine what will happen to the African family. When there are lawyers, very able lawyers within this region, but you bring in white people, and these white people are brought in under the cover of these same men. If you who are watching...
And can I just add one thing? They're not just brought in, they are funded, they are paid, their passage is paid, their accommodation is paid. I'll just throw that in.
Thanks. If you pay attention to the ones who are bringing them in, you will probably discover the same thing that I have discovered, which are that these men are not honorable men. They are not honorable. Now, one could say, I am casting all kinds of aspersions, but some of these men... Now, I encourage you who are watching to do your own research. Some of these men are building empires with their names at the top of it. Some of these men have conflicts of interest. They sit within political spaces and they also claim to lead civil society. Some of these men are accused of assaulting women. Some of these men... this is research that can be done. It's not hard. You just have to do you don't even have to do a Google search. You just do a YouTube search. Some of these men are known for harming women. So that which they did to us is nothing new. They are traveling at the expense, not of themselves. They are getting funding. They are championing a cause which is becoming questionable because of who they are and who they are not including. They are orchestrating conferences and seminars. They have established back rooms where decisions are being made. They are facilitating photo opportunities so that the optics look good. And they are threatening those of us who are saying, stop before this gets too far. Let us still speak to each other and honor our ancestors. They are not interested in the slightest. And in fact, word is reaching our ears that we are now being told to be careful. Be careful. Because clearly these men bring forth children. These men are greater than the Most High. These men care not for our ancestors. These men have been overtaken by their own ego. These men think that if they threaten us or send word that we should be careful, that we will stop. And what I would like to say to these men is that the Most High will decide when we take our last breath. That's what will happen. And so at this point, we have data that we are sharing. So even if you take one of us out, it will not stop what you have caused.
I was going to offer that as we reference these same men, that we're also, and I'm sharing this in my eye, including select women,
Mm-hmm.
enable these same men and hold them up, even when there is a need for intervention, reasoning, change of behavior beyond apology, that in word, that there should be a transformative shift in how these men engage with we women who move with the African Queen Mother Warrior vibration shift, etc. Because we're following that ancestral piece. And the reason I desired to bring that in, because the quality is not 100%, I'm going to see if I can get that small clip. And I encourage persons that are listening, that are viewing, to look at the link to what was actually videotaped. I think I just turned around one of my cameras. We sat in a half circle right in the grounds where we were just
Ejected,
that one
unceremoniously ejected.
from being able to
Disregarded.
that one dismissed. And ultimately it was a form of disrespect. Had we been, if we were really street,
Mm-hmm.
right, that could have looked very different because some persons, and again, because persons recognize and know that we operate through a space of regality, of royalty, of diplomacy in a very African ancestral context, and because we did not want to bring any disrespect in the form that we were disrespected, we elected to just sit, gather our thoughts, and speak from a space of not anger, not even emotion. I mean, we were sitting there with calabash, pouring libations from one to the other to make sure that we kept ourselves fluid. I think we talked so soft to make sure we didn't just scream out and say, "My son, you wrong." We didn't do that. All right.
Carry on bad.
Right.
On it.
And what was interesting was while this was going on, because as has been alluded to earlier, the whole idea was, well, we have to stop because the buses are coming and we have another event and so forth and so on. So when the bus got stuck in traffic and people
Mm-hmm.
still had to wait over an hour, there was ample time for us who were asked, we have a Q&A segment. Are there any questions from the audience? And not just us, but several other sisters and brothers came to the mic. But when they saw us, then it became an issue. And I'm not, whatever the optics were, I can't speak for what they saw. I know that we came in a space of not anger, animosity, or threat or antagonism of any sort. We were consciously, I remember many of us had our little notes like in our hand to make sure we stayed. So it was a question, not a statement delivery on the panel that you weren't on question. And we were denied that. And this is not the first time. And obviously it wasn't the last time. And that's why when persons hear the reference of these same men, and you can go and look and see who they are. I think for the purpose of because it's not like it won't be easy to see, right?
It
Because
ain't difficult.
right. So we're just highlighting that African Queen Mother warriors have decreed. We're not doing a declaration. We're not getting into no tit for tat back and forth. We're just making it clear. Think of it like a papal bull. Once once the Pope gives a decree from the Vatican, that's how it go for like centuries until it's revoked. So what we're saying, what we're enabling our brothers and sisters of light and those that choose to support truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony as Ma'at. Those that speak Ubuntu and then tear apart the very foundation and core of those of us that are coming in the interest of Ubuntu. We say, I am because you are. But if you're trying to dismantle me, to discredit me, to mash up my ability to make a living, to mash up my ability to be able to give voice in a space that you just came to the other day. And I ain't gonna say that. Some persons just came to this like the other day. And they are the ones that have been enabled and permitted to offer forms of disrespect and disregard and dismissiveness to many of our sisters in particular, and some of our brothers as well. And usually they attack the brothers that support the sisters. I just needed to offer that small interjection so that when we are moving forward in our reasoning today, that we are clear that this is a decree. We're just giving, most of us, all of us are researchers. We come from different backgrounds, so we can do the academic research and speak of the analysis of the crisis and so forth and the philosophical, ideological realms. We can do that. But we're speaking from a space of heart. And we're doing our best to not scream it out so that it's taken in my eye. But it's not a warning. It's definitely not a threat. This is how we're going to go from before no, because our ancestors have decreed that.
We must look at the character of those who are the same men. We must look at that. We must look at the model which is being applied to the affairs of the African family that is being exploited, traumatized, and continues to be traumatized by agents of a Eurocentric system. If you have melanin skin, whatever degree to which you consider yourself to be honorable, you would look at these things. These things are to do with a people who have been stolen, exploited, and women are considered during times of war to be collateral damage. We are sites of comfort. People do with us what they want. And when we articulate that something is not right, we are then discredited. We are then considered to be hysterical or an angry Black woman, unless we find we are favored by these same men. And some of that, and I'm not in a position to know exactly who, because there may be some people who are doing their best within the context of that space, but there is a thing that happens with abuse, with misogynistic approaches, with people who enjoy misogynoir, where they will cut off your money. I'm not wondering about this. I'm speaking as someone who knows this to be true. They will cut off your source of air unless you become horizontal.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even get the benefit of being horizontal in a 5-star place. You are encouraged to be what is it when you're not quite lying down, but you're still being fucked over?
Oh, Lord.
That one. And see, that's why I'm so grateful that you put that. Because see, again, I love what we're able to have this versation and then look at this international press statement. I would like to come so that persons know this is, and anyone that desires, again, African Queen Mother Warriors at gmail.com, or place it inside of the Facebook chat, the YouTube chat. There's ways to reach us. We are very transparent when it comes.
Search. Do a search.
I just
One
I think
Sister Esther's
Okay.
Camera. She
The
said to
camera.
carry on.
Yes, it's
Okay,
There we
yeah.
go.
doing its own thing.
Okay. This
I
is
mean,
a,
one of the things I wanted to touch on and to make a point is that we as Africans, you know, we need to learn from our history and from the past. We seek solutions. We're looking at reparations, reparatory justice. We're looking at restoring ourselves. You know, if we look at the tenets of reparations, we're looking at reclaiming that which was lost and putting it back in place. And one of the things we need to do is we need to learn from our history. And our history has always shown us that when we do not adhere to those principles, those fundamental principles, you spoke of Mahat, Ubuntu, and all the myriad of other principles that underpin our ontology and our philosophy as Africans, when we do not look at our history and learn the lessons from our history, which is that we must place our spirituality as part of our identity, we always falter. And this is one of the things that is happening currently with these same men and the women who buy into the misogyny, the misogynar, the patriarchy, those who have sold their souls and betrayed themselves to sit at the table and eat the crumbs, because the crumbs appear to them to be huge feasts, but in reality we know, because it lacks spirituality, that's what it is. You know, our lessons have shown us, you know, if we look at that 80 and the revolution, it was when the spiritual people, Bookman, Dati, and various people came in and brought that spirituality that we were able to overcome. And it makes me think of Ifa. There's a saying in Ifa that says that the women had the power and the men tricked the women and took it. Now, we are at a time, as you said, you articulated, Senator Doctor, when things are not going to keep going like that. We are coming back. We know, I had a wonderful guest. Big shout out to our queen, Cezanne Poetess, for her phenomenal energy on my show and for her poetry and her creativity. And she is someone that downloads and connects with spirit. And she spoke of seeing the creator. And the creator is a melanated, let's get this right, a melanated African woman. Now we know this, mitochondrial Eve. The melanated African woman is pure energy. She's the creator of everything. And as African women, we are supposed to be the rulers, the leaders. The world was created by us for us to rule and lead. And circumstances have led to, as you say, the vertical. Is it the vertical? Yes. I get confused. The things that were supposed to be this way.
Yeah, the things that were supposed to be
this way, and then tipping upside down. So now the white man, for example, followed by his lackeys who adhere to his principles, whether they're the same men from our community, the women who buy into the misogynoir and the misogyny and the patriarchy from our community, who sold themselves, they are also now sitting with the white man at his table at the top. And we, the African women, have now been played. But we see this time, the energy is turning. Nothing lasts forever. Everything will return. As it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. And so we African Queen Mother warriors are saying to you that we know what is to be. We have the capacity. We have the solutions. I mean, the women on this call are phenomenal on every level. And intellectually, like you say, we could sit down and write everything they write better. Even with my dyslexic self, I could still write. In fact, I never forget in 2015 when they put out this statement and we were like, what? I went up to the table with the same men and I said, listen, this is not appropriate, you know, this is missing, this is missing. They looked at me and they said, and I said, you know what, give it to me, I will rewrite it for you. And I got this response. And I won't say which men, but you can imagine, they looked at me like I'd offered to shoot them in the head. Like I stood up there and said, why? But all I said was, look, I will rewrite this for you. I offered my services for free. Nobody paid my passage and my hotel bill. I was staying by my uncle, sleeping on the sofa. You know, so we have the solutions and we have the capacity, and what we're reaching out to you to say, this has to change. The voices that are here alongside other voices of African Queen Mother warriors and African King Father warriors, the men who stand with us and understand and overstand our role in creation. We have the solutions. We're working with them. Some of them are involved with the work we do.
I want to read this section because what we've done is we have offered a 2025 version of
Mhm.
what we were saying in 2015. So the continuum is great. And I quote, Eurocentric paradigms which ignore established African-centered traditions and life practices are not conducive to our demand for reparatory justice. As the African Union hosts the annual International Summit on the theme of 2015, Year of Women's Empowerment and Development towards Africa's Agenda 2063, and the world commemorates, memorializes, and celebrates African Liberation Day, African women must be respected. In unity with our brothers and sisters of humanity, African queen mothers and revolutionary women warriors have united in order to have our voices heard by publishing this international statement. The issues raised herein are being shared in the spirit of love, peace, harmony, reciprocity, truth, justice, order, and balance. And I share that segment because what we've just said has reiterated what we had to say sitting after being dismissed from an event that was happening on the year. Notice what the theme was in 2015, Year of Women's Empowerment and Development.
Oh, the irony.
And so and again, we're seeing that some things, and I like to bring it to where we are now, as we're having this convening, there have been a host of initiatives, recognizing the anniversary of the Pan-African Conference in London over 100, I believe, 25 years ago, right? And our beloved African Queen Mother Warrior, Sister Esther, was able to be, again, I'm so grateful that we had the representation and someone engaged in that piece. We've seen that there's been a declaration that has come from that. We're praying that that is something that had not been subjected to the same experience that we had, that declarations come forward without the full respectful vetting from those present, as well as those that were not present, usually for economic or the scheduling reasons. I think it's really important to know that while we're having this convening and this reasoning, that many of our thousands of our sisters and brothers are converging into the United Nations headquarters in New York. Maybe not the best time in light of what's happening in the 48 contiguous United Snakes of America. And I say it like that intentionally because right now it's very serpentine, not serpentine Kundalini positive, but serpentine very reptilian, very challenging. And we're praying for the safety of everyone that's going in and out of New York, in and out of US immigration, in and out this ICE experience with this administration that is quite hostile to anything ancestral, ancient, African, Black, non-Eurasian, non-European. Let me be very clear, right?
And very destructive.
Very
Very
destructive.
destructive and dismantling at the moment.
Of course. I mean, anarchy and fascism at the same time, it just looks, at least we know what it looks like in 21st century version. I think that that's the part that is very important for persons to know. So while the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent is having its fourth session hosted in this space, that may not be the safest space, but we're praying for there to be some positivity that comes from that. We're also looking at some of the same energy that we experienced that are going to be the same energy. So granted, there's a certain continuity in that regard. However, our decree, our voices are commanding that there be another shift, because any type of gathering that's happening now has to be inclusive of the African woman, and not just any African woman, but those voices with actionable deliverables of African women that will make the full contribution appropriate. That's what I'm trying to get to. It should not be that we shouldn't have to beg to do the work, beg to get the money for the work, beg to be at the table to do the work, beg to have a crumb come this way for the work. And then it shouldn't be that. It should be a very inclusive, engaging experience that supports life, that supports ancestral resonance. Because other than that, as we've had this conversation before, then we're committing ancestral treason. And we're creating a very unpleasant outcome for what we're saying is supposed to be done. I mean, even again, looking at this statement, I keep coming to this because I like for persons to know the continuity. And those persons that don't know what we're talking about, again, if those that have just joined us, you're listening to African Queen Mother Warriors Rising. We are having a reasoning on global African Caribbean affairs. We're looking at reparations. We're looking at recognition, justice, and development. And we're speaking specifically to things that have transpired while everyone's honoring anniversaries. This is an anniversary of a very engaging experience that many of us have survived and still thrive through. But the decree, African women must lead. And that, with that being said, I quote, through African consensus, this statement calls for revolutionary corrective actions for the end of willful disrespect, marginalization, exclusionism, intellectual warfare, internalized sexist terrorism, misogyny, pathological patriarchy, and genocidal violence against our African women anywhere and everywhere, particularly within the organizational and institutional frameworks of these organizations, including summits, congresses, conventions, and similar gatherings. I just needed to make sure that, and again, there's only like a small portion left, but just so persons are clear that this was not a new versation. We took our time to make sure that the manner in which this decree, this statement was shared was so that there would be some, and there was very little response. The response was, be careful. The
Yeah.
response was exclusionism. The response was to dismiss, the same way we dismiss from a microphone, there was this dismissive, well, you're not going to get invited to the next one. We don't need you to come, no, right? So again, in any gathering, it's imperative that we not only call upon the names of our benevolent ancestors, but that we ceremoniously invite their presence in the most appropriate and respectable manner. That the failure to safeguard and to provide optimal protection and security is a serious issue. The publishing of delegates' names in public foyers is a risk on several levels. Unhealthy foods have no place in these gatherings. In keeping with our African cosmology and sacred number traditions, that value, the extensive spiritual significance of numbers, we question the adoption of a quote 10-point plan that is not only modeling a Eurocentric value system, but devoid of a spiritual component and feminine aspect. Again, remember this statement is April 2015 and was disseminated on African Liberation Day, May 25th, 2015. So I just like for person, don't think this is, make sure you keep it in context, right? And we African Queen Mothers and Revolutionary Women Warriors decree to our nation and all of humanity that the wanton acts of disrespect, disregard, and threatening theatrics imposed upon African women by men and patriarchy-controlled women will no longer be tolerated. ... Period. End quote. Just so the persons have context. So if you're not clear on what was said, or there's some missing comprehension element, please just send us an email, africanqueenmotherwarriors@gmail.com. African is Afrikan. Afrakan, right? queenmotherwarriors@gmail.com, or look for us in any of the social media so that you can have, because the document has been available for a decade.
We can make it available on every social media platform. I mean, I am being invited not to be as enthusiastic about sharing the data and the evidence that we hold. I am being very disciplined. I, I'm inviting African Queen Mother Warrior Esther, who would have been in receipt of that proclamation, that invitation, that statement, that which is not a warning. Which is interesting. You said it is not a warning. Yeah, isn't it? Okay. So having heard the history and having become familiar with the process, which is what you're interested in, um, and you know, this on the heels of my call for everyone and anyone to do your research. This is not angry Black women. You know, we are that trope that we are given whenever we say something's not right here. Can we have a look at this? The attack then happens onto the woman instead of saying, well, let's have a look at what it is you're talking about and see whether or not we are out of balance. You know, what is this thing called Ma'at? What are these principles that you speak of? Is there any place that we can learn? Might these women be bringing something that is important, especially given that we can't have an African family without the African woman? We're just not interested in the act of pleasure seeking and empire building. We are interested in the welfare of the African family and honoring our ancestors. What say you, African Queen Mother Warrior Esther? Because I cannot promise that this, you know, you see, when African Queen Mother Warrior Basu asked Sister Isis did that kind of thing like that, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have my children. I don't have my grandchildren.
Real, recognize real.
You're threatening people and you're careless in your threats because it's documented. The women who have been horizontal and have been betrayed are speaking. There are cases in the courts are going through the media where ones in high position who are practicing misogyny and misogynoir have found themselves in social media. Don't let that happen to you. Yes, Queen. I'm sorry. That was just out.
Yeah. I mean, you know, actually, just reflecting back on this 10-year journey, some other things came up for me. So obviously, I mean, I'm thinking back to what was the general atmosphere, especially for those of us who were part of the movement in Europe. And one of the things that was also happening around the same time, it was about who was invited at that summit, you know, who was on the program. And looking back over the program, we can see there was the sort of the recent formulation of NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission, linking with those in the Caribbean Reparations Commission. And there was kind of on the fringes of that, some people who were organizing to establish something called the European Reparations Commission. However, the people that were organizing or trying to establish the European Reparations Commission were totally outside of, you know, the Pan-African movement and, you know, long-standing reparations and constituencies. And so there was that tension that was also going on around who was invited and which voices were being amplified to promote a kind of sort of united front around a particular idea that for me was about silencing sections of the movement for African reparations that people felt was problematic, that was, kind of classified as being almost renegade, um, and that people who were not just willing to defer to the hegemon, because we have now, you've spoken about African Queen Mother warrior sister doctor about the empire building, but this is the hegemon. There are hegemons that are forming within these reparation structures, these emerging structures. Many of them are very hegemonic and cliquish because they only promote certain people who get with that program. And if you are outside of that, then woe betide you. And in particular, I think it was great to mention, it was Senate African Queen Mother Warrior Senate Doctor, the women of the hegemon as well. We focus a lot on the men, but we also have to think about those women or women folk, so-called sisters, who are supporting this. Why? Because they can be privileged and well positioned to benefit from the hegemonic systems that are developing. And so part of their function is to also suppress other women who do not fit in and do not submit to that hegemon. So that's what was happening. And I say it because I'm a member of PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe. And there was voices from the movement in Europe and in particular the UK, but those voices were much more, cooperative with the hegemon. And I have to say, even though I was a co-founder of the Global African Congress, that was one of the organizations. So people like me, who from the time I joined this movement have always been very visible, have always done spokesperson work because I am an advocate, it's part of what I do, then were being challenged for critiquing CARICOM and the approach that we were seeing, because we were also hearing the voices of those of you located outside of Europe, particularly in the Caribbean and in parts of Africa, Mama Africa, and the wider Americas or Abya. We were hearing your voices. As PARCO, we see it as our responsibility to amplify the voices of the various, African heritage communities of reparatory justice interests. So we were doing that. And we were very much in touch with women in particular Caribbean countries who were having to deal with men in leadership of this movement who were being challenged because of issues of sexual and gendered violence against women. Yeah? And this was being, suppressed by many men who are elders and distinguished men in our communities who saw that as undermining this kind of false unity that they felt was popping up now. And that the voices of particularly women who were questioning that and who were challenging that in Ma'at, in recognition that how can we truly have reparatory justice if we are suppressing the voices of half of humanity, and in particular our mothers, our sisters, our women folk who have been carrying this movement, and who have been leading but who are not being recognized. So that was also happening at the same time. So there was a really wonderful convergence, even though these kind of two poles of really, trying to ensure that what we were doing was honoring the ethics of African reparatory justice, the principles and values based on our highest, ideals of Ma'at and Ubuntu, that we were trying to enforce that in love and with respect, So there were these two poles of activity that were happening divinely, simultaneously, but not connected. And so this anniversary has given me an opportunity, being a student of our people's story, to really look back on who were the forces, what were the arguments, what were the challenges that we were making, that now, as we say, our story is best qualified to reward our research, because now these voices are becoming louder and louder and louder. And the fact that we have African Queen Mother warriors rising as an evolution of what you started back then is an indication of that. And so many other women who are joining us, so many of our brothers who support us, because it's also true that those brothers who have always been alignment and recognized our role, and we've worked harmoniously and cooperatively together, have also been sidelined and maligned and attacked and accused of all kinds of things because they have, healed whatever remnants of malevolent patriarchy that they have internalized as a result of that global system of domination of white supremacy racism. So I think it's important for us, and this is what we have committed to doing, for putting our narrative officially on the record, which we have continued to do. And this is so key, because there's so much there's a proliferation of research and scholarship and documentaries and all kinds of creative outputs that are telling partial narratives, partial stories about the journey of reparations. And we have to ensure that we must tell our own story, because we know that the tales of our liberation are being colonized, and they are being distorted in a way to create and shore up hegemonic men and the sisters that stand by them, because they are more interested in power for themselves rather than the true emancipation and liberation and restoration of the African family, where we can elevate the best of our African civilization that has sustained us and that we need to elevate in order to take back our world and restore ourselves to being in the rightful place as custodians of this rich legacy that has been bequeathed to us.
I also want to add to that. One of the things that's really important is the meetings or the convenings that happen in Africa. And that what was mentioned about this unfortunate meeting happening in the United Snakes, America, with a KKK at the end. Again, these things, there was one recently in Geneva, and these spaces they're hostile spaces for us. And what I admire, one of the many things I admire about the work of Sister Esther is the conference that was held in Benin, in the Republic of Benin, in Porto Novo. And had it not been for her hand and the hand of the organization she's working with, in which she has a leadership role and is recognized as a leader, as a woman, the men in that organization do not seek to reduce her or denigrate her in any way or dismiss her. We were able to actually hold one of the first very important reparations conferences in the Republic of Benin. So our African people could be present. And I want to also big up the other Sister Esther, one of my warrior queens who's on her way actually to this place, this conference, but for her work in ensuring that we had a conference, a pre-conference to the Permanent Forum conference last year in Zambia. Again, taking into consideration that these important convenings, these gatherings of Africans should happen in Africa and in the Caribbean. I also heard, to my dismay, that apparently there was a reparations or some sort of Pan-African conference in Berlin earlier this year, Berlin of all places, to commemorate the Berlin conference. Really? In Berlin, though, in this current time? we really have to look at who is leading on these convenings, these conferences, these meetings, and what is the true energy, the spirit of people that would believe that we Africans should be gathering in these spaces. So our sister Esther, I feel it's really important, again, to acknowledge that work that you did.
Yeah, that's with the International Network of Scholars and Activists for African Reparations, which was formed in 2017. And this was an important, and not was, it is still functioning. And as PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe, myself and my colleague, Kofi Marley-Klue, worked to co-found INASAR with scholars, Professor Joyce Scott at the University of Boston and Dr. Nicola Frith at the University of Edinburgh. But this was an important space to bring together scholars and scholar activists and community activists around synthesizing the knowledge that we were producing, because through our struggle, we produced knowledge. And we were very concerned at the way in which a lot of institutionalized, what we call establishment academics, were now being pushed into the forefront of knowledge production around reparations that was totally dismissing African knowledge systems, indigeneity, the fact that as African people in the diaspora, that we retained aspects of our African indigeneity, that we didn't just become Black, and it's almost like our indigeneity is not recognized. And so as INASAR, we created this mechanism, this platform where we could dialogue and have some of those struggles and those debates amongst us around the knowledge that we were producing and who was it really serving and whose interests were being promoted and why it is we were not recognizing the knowledge and the scholarship, whether it was documented or however it was documented, by our grassroots leaders who were unsung, often being suppressed and marginalized. And now people were literally, making their careers and gaining PhDs and professorships off of the back of our struggle. And that INASAR still continues today. And we've continued to elevate African perspectives on reparations, because a lot of the knowledge that we're utilizing on reparations is Eurocentric, and we're simply trying to apply it to our situation rather than recognizing part of the legacy of what some of us refer to as the Ma'angamizi was that attempt to destroy our knowledge systems and kill them, the epistemicide. And so a big part of the repair is restoring our knowledge systems, renewing them and repurposing them for our times today and to advance us into the future in a Sankofa tradition, in recognition that there can be no true reparatory justice without cognitive justice, and recognizing the sacerdotal knowledge that we carry that must be infused within our organizing processes and the strategies that we build to effect and secure holistic reparations. Yes.
And again, just to add that this second decade has failed by its very aims. As we know, it was justice, recognition, and development. People were arguing, if we're going to have a decade, reparations must be on the agenda. I mean, I remember doing a presentation, there can be no justice, recognition, and development without reparations. And yet again, this second decade, apparently, again, the word reparations is not mentioned. So all the things that we're talking about are yet again being undermined. So we have yet another decade. What's going to even come of it? ...
And this is why it's important that we connect those dots, because oftentimes, and I do recognize and I do understand some of the challenges that those people who are in those types of forums have. But unless we are connecting back into our communities, we will never have the strength or the power to bring about the changes that we need to bring about, including the changes in the language. why we still have terms like transatlantic slave trade in many of, I do not know. I really do not know, but who's that down to? That is down to us. And so we really have to, appreciate the importance of the type of representation that we have. And we are not yet at the place where we have substantive African representation. We have descriptive African representation, where we have people that look like us, maybe speak like us, born in the same place we were born. But until we have people that are African-centered and that are referencing and speaking with an African mind, and actually promoting our knowledges that connect back to our ancestry, our lineages of struggle and resistance and shaping the world in our own image and likeness, then it will always be just descriptive. And what many of us, and African Queen Mother warriors included, are seeking to do is to embed and solidify and ground that substantive African representation in all forums, all spaces, all sections and strata of society where African reparations is being discussed, conceptualized, and articulated and strategized around. As we say, nothing about us without us. Anything about us without us is against us.
Ashe.
Ashe. I would completely echo what is being said, and once again call for those who are sistering, idrin, friend, frenemy, do your research. Go and find out for yourself if what we're saying has any basis. For this movement, without proper consideration of the process, has no integrity. What it is empire building. I would also encourage, and I thank the royal ones here for pointing out that there are women who are conspiring and colluding to recognize that thing called aging flesh. Aging flesh. Ask Queen Mothers about aging flesh. Ask your grandmothers and your great-grandmothers. Read the books. You are betraying not just your ancestors, but as someone who is a therapist and sits with those who have been traumatized by this and that and the other, there is a realization when you recognize that actually you've been used and confused. And maybe the using has stopped, but the confusion remains, and that's why you end up tasting your own snot or trying to hide. It's called walking and hiding. The shame that you shouldn't be feeling becomes very heavy. We don't need to collude with any organization or any individual that is not honoring who we are and where we come from. So it's really important that you don't just look to African Queen Mother warriors to periodically bring certain things to your attention. The movement needs African women to be active in it. And sometimes, far too frequently in my opinion, but sometimes our African men need to be reminded that you cannot do anything that is complete without our involvement. You absolutely cannot do anything that is complete without our involvement. So you can raise your voice, you can attempt to intimidate us, you can send your people to say whatever you want to send your people, send word. But if you threaten any one of us individually, you threaten us collectively. And you better know what you do. because some of you have already taken a fall. Fall down on bus on head. Do not believe that that cannot happen again. Peace.
Touch one, touch all.
And I wish to anchor on a couple of things. Because again, while we're having this reasoning, there are certain convenings that are happening. And I'm very grateful that we have sisters as well as brothers that will give voice with actionable deliverables for the things that need to be brought into these various alliance meetings, these side convenings, these celebratory and commemorative convenings around this permanent forum. And for persons that aren't familiar, please go to the United Nations website, un.org/en, or whichever language works for you, and look into what is happening, what is on the very short agenda for the permanent forum on people of African descent, which even from its inception, there were many SisDr African Queen Mother warriors that were saying, we don't descend, we ascend. That'll be another conversation. But this fourth session that commences tomorrow formally to Thursday the 17th, their agenda, at least the provisional agenda, is highlighting not only their program work that they've done over the last year and from the third session coming forward, but specifically I want to highlight the themes. So while the second International Decade for People of African Descent is continuing the theme of recognition, justice, and development, it's really important to know that the reason they kept it is because not much was done the first decade. And persons didn't even know that there was a first international decade. So that's why they did that continuum. But I want to highlight what are the sub-themes that have been integrated into this second international decade for people of African descent, I guess on paper, and how that is being folded into all of these convenings, all of these gatherings, and hopefully actionable deliverables within the permanent forum for people of African descent, because that's the whole idea. It's permanent. So there's to be permanency in what they're addressing. So it's reparatory justice for African people of African descent, human rights of women and girls of African descent, policymaking and systemic racism, a human rights-based approach, and artificial intelligence and digital justice for people of African descent. I think it's really important to know that these are the things that are at least on the agenda, and that there are a host of different organizations, entities, individuals, as I'm really appreciative of that reference to the empire building, because for some persons, they're coming to this for their own personal aggrandizement. And that's just how it goes. And, everybody wants to be an influencer. Why not be an influencer around the International Decade of the Permanent Forum? But for other people, they're coming representing voices that could not get to New York, that were unable to be present in these convenings, that did not have, and I keep coming back to the funding, and I want to be more specific, even having access to the resource to be able to attend. Some of the spaces, and I had mentioned this offline, and I'll say it here, some of these convenings, and it's not to say we do not need to be in physical space, because we do. We've been very dependent on virtual space and hybrid space, and that does its job to a point, but we need to be like in-house, closed door, internal to get to some of the actionable deliverables that are essential for this movement, these various campaigns to be successful and viable. And I always bring up the question, who is making the money from convenings? Which hotels are providing reparatory contributions because they know that people are coming from around the world to be in these spaces, whether it's Geneva or New York in the case of the UN? And what are they offering as part of their contribution to repairing the damages done to our people that are now convening in these spaces and have to travel on these respective airlines, these respective trainways? rent specific vehicles, deal with Uber or taxi, much less the accommodations, which are usually astronomical. It's not inexpensive to stay in Geneva or New York, period. And so I think it's really critical that persons start to, because some of us think of these things, and then others just focus because they do have the support and resource to be able to go and stay in certain spaces. And again, some of us have been, in certain instances, granted some of those opportunities. But when people see that you come with particular principles, specifically with integrity to our ancestral and contemporary African traditions and the traditional institutions that are oftentimes dismissed, just like some of us have been, then it becomes a challenge to be engaged in some of these convenings. So I really would like to make sure that persons recognize, for everyone that's going to these various convenings, make sure to include voice that it's tied to actionable deliverables that are inclusive of our African women.
But also people who don't have the passports that the four of us hold because of the birth situations that in where we were born. You see, even those who might be invited and offered accommodation and travel, if you come from a Caribbean or an African country where there is a visa restriction, there's been so many instances where people have not been allowed to enter Switzerland or America, for example.
Yes.
And we must remember that even if you are invited and offered support to get there, if the global racial barriers are put up that prevent you from traveling because of the passport you hold, you will not be able to enter these spaces. You will be excluded.
I appreciate that this conversation ways I can't even fully express, because these same, let's say these same people, extend it beyond these same men, these same people travel as dignitaries. They do not have to go through some of what some of us who are trotting because we are called to do it. It's an assignment. It's a spiritual assignment. We have a different experience when we travel. So some of us have the privilege of getting through those gates, if you like, because of the color of our passport and where we were earthed. However, the journey itself is traumatizing. It is challenging. We are vulnerable. When these same people, they travel in a different class, they come through a different pathway to get to the passport check. They are picked up in fancy. Whose money is being spent? I got insider information that I cannot disclose because otherwise I'm just warned not to do it. But the money that's being used, I would go so far as to say that it might be a question. This is just a question. Because things like misappropriation of funds happens. And if you are linked to organizations where you can determine who and how and why, you need 4 people to carry your laptop.
Yeah.
Really? You need to, let me not even go into some of what you question you may need to have answered. Okay. What are you actually doing with the funds that you have not had to pay, or the resources you've not had to pay? When you just come on this thing, just the other day, people who have been doing this for years because their intention is honorable and guided by principles that are linked to spirituality and ancestry. You who come the other day, navigated strategically, assigned and aligned yourself. Some wanna sell out on a flesh and sell out on a soul. appear in public places with no charisma or no whatever it is, no get and put on no flesh, aging flesh, and have no regard or respect for those who have trod to be there.
Sacrificed.
Mhm.
If anything happens to any of the ones who have sacrificed or trod or whatever, even if we do have resources and we can get there, so we haven't sacrificed a lot, but we continue to do this. If any of these governments decide they want to take a set upon us, who should we call? Who will defend us? Those of us who carry certain passports aren't going to be defended by the people whose crown or whatever it is that's on the passport. They will not come. Some of us whose ancestry comes through the Caribbean, the governments will not come. Some of us are lying to organize it. The organization will not come. People who said I know you will be glad.
Yes.
Let's tell the
Yes.
truth and shame the devil. You will be glad. Yeah. So we know when we travel, we take huge risks and we have to call on the ancestors to protect us and guide us and direct us as we move. So I'm not in any kind of state where I think that because we're on a reparations trud, that the same people who are going through the diplomatic whatever with their whatever it is that they've managed to strategically align themselves with are going to give two, let me not use flat and flowery language because it's not appropriate. Yeah. I know that you're not going to care. I know that you are holding a position knowing that there are watery graves that you fly over and ancestors who you don't honor. You don't honor. How we end up with a 10 point. Because when you are asked questions about spirituality, Unu response is very, very revealing about how much you don't know. And what we are offering is to bring the balance back. And if you lead with humility, this will have a whole different energy and a whole different flavor and taste. We're not warning you, apparently.
And with that, I am really grateful that we were able to offer some historical context, offer persons like a short chronology of what has transpired, and use this particular time where Africans globally are gathering in different convenings and highlighting ways to address reparatory justice, restitution, repatriation, the transformative growth of African people, and that the voices in action of African Queen Mother warriors, whether present in Geneva, New York, or wherever, or not physically, that at least in these various platforms, we are able to have things brought to the full fruition for our upliftment. I think it's also an excellent opportunity if we can move in that vibration of your sharing of a call to action moving forward as we prepare to take a pause from this particular convening today. And I would love to ask African Queen Mother Warrior Basu Ast Isis.
So for me, again, coming back to the lessons we learned from history, lessons we learned from our work, going back to, African Queen Mother Warrior Sister Esther mentioned Sankofa, and I think I see some birds on her ears. We need to go back and fetch it. We need to reclaim. Part of the reparatory justice agenda of reparations is about reclaiming, ultimately. The work that we're doing is about reclaiming our greatness, reclaiming who we are, centering who we are, centering our philosophies, our ontologies, our spirituality in our work. We cannot simply have political work or activism without having that foundation. And for me, we need to really fix up. We need to fix up. We need to think critically about where we are gathering. As we said, where is this money going? We have potentially hundreds of Africans gathering in places and spaces that don't want us, don't value us, are complicit in our oppression, in our violation, in the appropriation, extraction of our resources, and continue to be unjustly enriched by our people. And yet we're going there to give them more of our resources, to pay hotel and pay transport and everything going into their economy. So where are we going to be gathering? We need to look to Africa and the African diaspora. And we need to be brave and fearless. We need to be these warriors, and we need to call out these same men and the same women, the same people who are complicit in ensuring that a small clique of people, the empire builders, as was said, retain the resources that are intended for all of us, act as gatekeepers to creating true solutions, avoid and do everything possible to denigrate the ancestral knowledge that we are building, that people like women, like African Queen mothers, like the four of us, have been institutional in working towards. And I would also invite anyone that views this, anyone that comes across us, reach out to us. Every one of us, I'm sure Sister Esther will be back shortly, every single one of us on this platform today has the knowledge, the wisdom, the expertise, the potential to create solutions, to facilitate solutions. And we're all available because we all serve. Not a single one of us here has been made wealthy through our work. In fact, it's the opposite. Some of us here have actually had our resources stripped from us through our work, through raising our voices. And so we're all available in our different spaces and places, bringing our different skills and experience, expertise, knowledge to assist and to continue to serve, to actually implement solutions for our liberation. And I give thanks for sharing this space with you all. With y'all.
Could you please share with everyone how they can engage with some of your radio podcasts, as well as some of the other work you're doing? At least give them an email, a way to reach you, so that it's clear on the record. This is where you can reach out to.
Okay, so I'm available on Faferity Radio, which is Faferity, www.faferitylondon.co.uk on Saturdays between 4 to 6 p.m. UK time. You can reach out to me as we have many identities because we're multifaceted goddesses. I'm also available by email if you're interested in coming and having a conversation with me, sharing knowledge with me on my platform, the Speak Your Truth Show. You can reach out to me using my DJ name, my DJ and radio presenter name, Eclectic Goddess. So it's eclectic G radio @hotmail.com. And of course, you can reach out to me for other issues and matters or engagement through the African Queen Mother Warriors email that has been repeated. And I'm happy for you to reach me that way. You can also get me on Insta. For the younger people, let me see if I can remember my Insta handle. I'm trying to be all young and on it now. So it is I underscore SIS poet underscore goddess. And I'm happy to come share some poetry with you, or support you, to facilitate you to write poetry, or to use poetry as a form of liberation. My art is my weapon.
Give thanks. Give thanks. I would ask, I know there's some tech issues, but African Queen Mother Warrior Sister Esther, could you give us your word sound power?
Yeah, sorry everyone. I don't know what's happening with the Zoom, but Zoom has just got a mind of its own. It's been switching off my camera and all kinds of stuff. But they couldn't stop this broadcast. So in terms of where people can locate me, I think it's best. I'm involved with so many different structures, but I'll just the best place is probably email Esther Xosei @gmail.com, and Xosei is spelled Xosei, and also on X @Xosei, Xosei, and Insta it's Ms. Xosei, MZXOSEI. So that's the best way to get hold of me. But I'm easy to find if you really want to find me.
Thanks. Give thanks. And Queen Mother Warrior SisDr, please give us your word sound power.
Give thanks. What an honor it is to be in the presence of such greatness. I am humbled regularly every single time I am privileged enough to sit with ones who love us the way that we love us. I, like my sisters have said, have a number of identities. That's just how it's always been. If we didn't have the identities that we have, one strike by some men, same men, would have cut off my lifeline, would have stopped me from eating, would have stopped my family from eating, and would have destroyed my home. So, African women often do a number of things. I am also easy to find. My offering with that would be just be clear about what you're contacting me for. My email address is Dr. Sandra Richards, which is DrSandra @hotmail.com. That's my email address. On Insta, my tag is IAM.SisDr. That's IAM.SisDr. It's not hard to find me. And then, of course, you have the African Queen Mother Warriors email address. I would just, once again, ask that know why you are contacting me. I'm serious. I play, but not with everyone. I'm a healer. So if you want to go down that road, we can communicate. But if you want to hurt me, understand that I am guided and protected by the Most High. So, no wayado. Give thanks.
Give thanks. I can be reached at Ast Speaks on most social media platforms. That's ASTSPEAKS. You can also look for me in ChenziRa Kahina, ChenziRa Kahina. As was shared earlier, the Gmail account that would come to all of us is AFRAKHINA KAN QU, permiso, Queen Mother, MOTHERQUEEN WARRIORS @gmail. If you just remember that the African is spelled AFRAKAN, and then Queen Mother Warriors, contemporary spelling, all lowercase, @gmail.com. And that is also placed inside of the notes on YouTube on the Speaks page. It's connected to any place you'll see this link. We'll also make sure that that email is available for those that prefer to communicate via email. And always know, I think everyone can tell, we move serious, more SIRIUS than just SERIOUS. And the intention is to keep it so that we remain in truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. The principle that persons are more accustomed to knowing as the principles of Ma'at. And with that, it's been an honor and a privilege. Always a joy. Always a joy. We just keep saying Hotep, Hotep, Hotep. And as we started, because sometimes persons do not get the joy and privilege of hearing our opening reflection, our opening statement, our opening vibe, we always like to make sure that we close the way that we opened to the best of our ability. And we pray. Can everyone see?
Is coming up. Yes, we can.
There she comes.
There we go. Much more blessings.